Preeta Zenti sat quietly beneath her bridal veil, her heart pounding louder than the wedding drums around her. The hall glittered with lights, the air heavy with whispers, and every pair of eyes seemed fixed on the man beside her, Watson. He didn't look like the grooms people expected for a girl like her. His suit was plain, almost ordinary, and though his shoes were polished, they were clearly worn from use. His face carried a calm smile, but behind that silence lay something unreadable, something deeper than anyone around could grasp. The guests muttered among themselves, their voices slicing through Preeta's fragile heart. Why would she marry a man like him? He has nothing. No house, no car, no money. She could have chosen someone better. The Zenti family has ruined her life with this decision. Every word felt like a blade, and yet she sat still, her henna-stained hands clutched tightly together in her lap. She whispered a prayer in her heart, asking for strength, for courage, for the wisdom to understand why fate had led her to this moment. She had chosen him against the advice of her relatives, against the mocking laughter of her friends. Something in Watson's quiet dignity had spoken to her, and though she could not yet explain it, she trusted her heart more than the voices of the world. Watson's eyes shifted to hers for a fleeting moment. His gaze wasn't heavy with shame or anger. It was steady, calm, almost comforting. It was as if he were telling her silently, "Let them talk, let them laugh. Time will answer them better than words ever could." And for a moment, in the storm of whispers, Preeta felt her heart steady. She remembered the first time she saw him. It was a rainy afternoon at a small tea stall. She had been sheltering from the sudden downpour when she noticed him, his shirt soaked, cradling a shivering little boy in his arms. He took off his own jacket and wrapped it around the child, even though he was drenched himself. That simple act of kindness had struck her more deeply than any riches she had ever seen. From that moment, she knew this man was different. He had no gold to offer, but his heart was pure. And when the proposal came, she had chosen him, ignoring the protests of her family. Her aunt's words from earlier that morning still echoed in her ears. "You are destroying your future, Preeta. This man will give you nothing but suffering. You'll waste your youth in his poverty." Preeta had lowered her eyes then and whispered to herself, "I don't need wealth, I need love." The ceremony passed. Vows were exchanged. Prayers were spoken. And yet the hall never stopped buzzing with disbelief. People scoffed at Watson's old-fashioned shoes, at his rented suit, at the absence of expensive jewelry or fancy cars. But Watson never flinched. He held his silence as if it were a shield, smiling gently, carrying himself with a strange kind of dignity. Only when his eyes fell on Preeta did his expression soften, his lips curving into a faint smile that seemed to say, "I will prove them wrong one day. Just wait." Later, as they left the wedding hall, there was no luxury car waiting for them. No grand procession of shining vehicles, no crowd of admirers, just a taxi, decorated with a simple garland of flowers. Preeta's relatives rolled their eyes and shook their heads, their whispers chasing her as she walked out. Look at this, a taxi for the bride. She could have done so much better. Preeta sat in silence during the ride. Her heart was heavy, doubt creeping into her thoughts. Had she really made the right decision? Was this truly her destiny? The city lights passed in a blur outside the window, and her chest tightened with fear of what lay ahead. Watson finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Preeta, I can't give you the stars or the moon, but I promise you something greater. I will never betray your trust. I will honor you, respect you, and protect your happiness with everything I have." She turned her head to look at him. His words carried no grandeur, no hollow promises. They were simple, but they felt true. A tear escaped her eye, and she whispered back, "I don't want the stars, Watson. I only want your heart." He smiled faintly, but when he looked out of the window again, his eyes glistened as though he were holding back tears of his own. There was something hidden in his silence, something he wasn't ready to reveal. When they arrived, Preeta stepped out of the taxi to see the small house that was now her home. It was modest, almost shabby compared to what she had grown up with. A single room, a small kitchen, a wooden bed that looked as though it had seen many years. The words of her aunt flashed through her mind again. Your youth will burn in his poverty." For a moment her courage faltered, but Watson opened the creaking door and said with quiet pride, "This is our home. Small, yes, but it will be filled with love. That's what makes it bigger than any mansion." His optimism, his ability to see warmth in such scarcity, touched her. She smiled faintly and stepped inside. For her, it was not the walls or the roof that mattered. It was the man standing beside her. That night, when Preeta finally drifted to sleep, Watson remained awake. He sat at the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed on a leather-bound diary he had pulled from a hidden compartment in the cupboard. He opened it, revealing documents, shares, signatures, contracts, accounts worth fortunes. It was the diary of a man the world did not know. Watson was not poor. He was not the helpless man people believed him to be. He was a billionaire who had chosen silence, who had chosen to hide his identity because of betrayals and wounds from the past. But now, looking at Preeta's sleeping face, he felt a rush of emotion. He whispered softly, almost as if confessing to himself, "One day, Preeta, one day you'll know the truth. You'll understand why I hid it. But until then, I need to know that you chose me for who I am, not for what I own." He closed the diary, tucked it away, and lay beside her, his heart heavy with the secret he carried. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the storm of fate building in silence. Everyone thought Preeta had ruined her life by marrying a poor man. No one knew she had just married the man who could change the destiny of anyone he touched. The morning after their wedding was quiet, almost too quiet. Preeta awoke to the sound of birds outside the small window. Sunlight filtered in through thin curtains, painting soft lines across the room. She turned her head and saw Watson already awake, sitting by the table with a cup of tea. His posture was straight, his face calm, as though he had been awake for hours. "Good morning," he said gently when he noticed her stirring. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice still heavy with the weight of last night's emotions. For a moment she simply sat there, taking in the sight of her new home. The walls were plain, the furniture minimal. There was no grandeur, no gold frames, no chandeliers. Just simplicity. Her heart felt a pang. Was this really her life now? But then she looked at Watson, and in the stillness of his gaze, she found an unexpected peace. They shared breakfast together, just bread and tea, nothing more. Preeta ate quietly, her thoughts torn between hope and fear. Watson, on the other hand, seemed content. He carried himself with a strange dignity that clashed with his humble surroundings. He spoke little, but when he did, his words felt steady, as though rooted in something unshakable. As days passed, Preeta began to settle into the rhythm of her new life. She cooked meals in the small kitchen, swept the little yard, and learned to live without the luxuries she had once taken for granted. At first it was difficult. She missed the comfort of her family home, the ease of having everything at her fingertips. Now every little task demanded effort. But she found herself growing stronger with each passing day. What surprised her most was Watson's nature. He was not the kind of man to complain about hardships. He rose early each morning, left for work, and returned late at night. His clothes were always simple, but his manners never faltered. He treated her with respect, never raised his voice, and never once made her feel small. The world might have seen him as poor, but to Preeta, he seemed rich in ways she could not yet define. Still, doubts haunted her at times. When relatives came to visit, their words were filled with mockery. One afternoon, her cousin sneered as she looked around the tiny house. "So this is where you live now? Preeta, you could have had a life of luxury. Instead you chose this? How long before regret eats you alive?" Preeta smiled faintly and said nothing, but the words stung. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had indeed made a mistake. Watson, sensing her unease, turned toward her and asked quietly, "Do you regret marrying me?" Her heart ached at the question. She turned to him, tears gathering in her eyes. "No," she whispered, I wonder sometimes what the future will be like. Everyone thinks I've thrown my life away." Watson reached for her hand, holding it gently but firmly. "The future is not written by others' opinions. It is written by what we build together. Let them think what they want. One day they will see." There was something in his voice that carried more weight than she could understand. It wasn't just comfort. It was a promise. Time moved on, and Preeta began to notice little things about Watson that puzzled her. Sometimes late at night, she would wake to find him still awake, speaking softly into his phone in the other room. His tone would shift, firm and commanding, nothing like the quiet man she lived with during the day. She would catch fragments of his words, finalize the deal, send the documents, keep it discreet. Whenever she asked, he would smile and brush it off. Just work, he would say. She also noticed how people treated him when they were outside. At the market, some shopkeepers would stand a little straighter when he approached, offering respect that seemed unusual for a man they believed was poor. Preeta found herself wondering who he truly was, but she kept her questions locked inside, trusting that he would reveal himself in his own time. Their bond grew stronger through the struggles. When the money ran low, Preeta found ways to stretch every coin, and Watson would quietly bring home just enough to keep them going. There were nights when they shared nothing but rice and lentils, yet he would laugh softly, telling her stories until her worries faded. One evening, when the power went out, they sat together under the dim glow of a lantern. Preeta sighed, frustrated by the inconvenience. "Sometimes I feel like life is testing me every day," she confessed. Watson smiled, his eyes glimmering in the lantern light. "Tests only make us stronger. Diamonds are formed under pressure, Preeta. You are becoming stronger than you know." His words touched her deeply, though she didn't know why they sounded as though he was speaking from experience, as if he himself had been through unimaginable trials. But not everyone was as gentle as he was. Preeta's relatives continued to criticize her. At family gatherings, they whispered behind her back. Once, in front of everyone, her uncle asked mockingly, "So, Preeta, how does it feel to wash clothes and cook in a tiny kitchen? Regretting your choice yet?" Preeta's cheeks burned, but before she could answer, Watson placed a calm hand on her shoulder. He looked directly at her uncle and said with quiet firmness, "Happiness is not measured by the size of your house or the weight of your gold. It is measured by peace in the heart, and I intend to give Preeta all the peace she deserves." The room fell silent for a moment, his words cutting through the mockery. Preeta looked at him then with new eyes, realizing that though he seemed poor in wealth, he was rich in courage. Still, in the privacy of their home, she sometimes saw the shadows in his eyes. Nights when he stared out of the window, deep in thought, as though carrying a burden she could not see. Once she asked, "What are you thinking about?" He smiled faintly and said, "About tomorrow." But she sensed there was more, something he was not ready to share. As weeks turned into months, she learned to love him not just for his kindness, but for his resilience. The world laughed at him, but he never lowered himself to their level. Instead, he stood tall in silence, a mystery wrapped in humility, and all the while, his secret remained untouched, locked away in that leather diary he kept hidden from her. Each night when she slept, he would glance at it, his fingers brushing the worn cover, his heart heavy with the knowledge of who he really was. He was not the poor man the world mocked. He was a man whose name commanded empires, whose wealth could silence every insult. But until the right moment came, he would remain silent, waiting, watching, testing the truth of her love. Preeta believed she had married a man with nothing. Little did she know, she had married a man who had everything, and yet chose to give her his heart before his fortune. "I thought marriage would make life easier, that somehow, the moment we signed those papers and shared a home, the world would suddenly align for us." But reality has its way of humbling dreams. Preeta and I returned from the small ceremony with nothing but a few blessings, a handful of coins, and hearts that beat stubbornly against the weight of poverty. Our first home together was barely a room. The walls were cracked, paint flaking off in tired strips, and the ceiling leaked when it rained. A broken window let in the winter wind, and we stuffed it with old cloth to keep ourselves from freezing. For most people, it would have been unbearable. But for us, it was heaven compared to the loneliness we had known before. Every night, we lay close together under a worn blanket, her head resting on my chest, her fingers tracing the calluses on my hands. And every night I would whisper the same words. One day, Preeta. One day you won't have to live like this. She would smile softly, her voice barely a whisper. As long as I have you, Watson, I already have everything. But even in her brave words, I sensed the cracks. She never complained, but I could see her hunger when we had to share a single loaf of bread between us. I noticed her shivering when the cold seeped through the walls. And worst of all, I saw the way people looked at her whenever we walked into town together, how her friends whispered behind her back, mocking her for choosing a man like me. It stung, but I stayed silent. Because deep inside, I carried a secret that no one knew, not even Preeta. You see, before all this, before the world stripped me down to rags and obscurity, I wasn't poor. I wasn't ordinary. I was heir to one of the most powerful business empires in the city. But wealth has a way of attracting enemies, and family even more so. When my father died, leaving behind his vast fortune, my stepbrother and his allies forged documents, twisted the will, and cast me out with nothing. I chose silence because fighting them would have meant blood, courts, and a world Preeta was too pure to be dragged into. They thought they had broken me, but what they never knew was that I had already taken steps to protect my inheritance. I had investments hidden under different names, businesses registered in countries far away, and trusted friends who were keeping them safe until the right time. So, while the world called me poor, I was anything but. I was waiting, watching and building quietly, and the day would come when the mask would fall. Still, as months passed, I couldn't ignore Preeta's struggle. She sold handmade scarves in the market while I worked long hours at a mechanic's shop. Our hands were dirty, our clothes worn, yet we laughed together, dreamed together. There was a dignity in our struggle, but I hated watching her suffer when I had the power to change it all. One evening, as I returned from the shop, I found her sitting by the window, tears silently rolling down her face. She quickly wiped them when she saw me, but I had already noticed. I sat beside her and asked, "What's wrong?" She shook her head. "Nothing, Watson. Sometimes I wonder if I've been foolish. My friends, my relatives, they say I threw away my future by marrying you. They mock me for choosing love over money. And sometimes," her voice broke, "sometimes I feel they might be right." Those words stabbed me deeper than any insult I had ever heard. I took her hands in mine, calloused fingers holding her trembling ones. "Preeta, listen to me. They don't know us. They don't know what we share. Let them laugh, let them scorn. One day their laughter will choke in their throats when they see who we really are. You'll walk into those very rooms they shut you out of, and they will bow their heads in shame." She looked at me through tears, searching my face for truth. "Do you really believe that?" I smiled faintly. "I don't believe it, Preeta. I know it." And in that moment, I silently vowed that the time to reveal my true self was drawing near. But before I could act, life threw another test at us. One morning, while Preeta was selling her scarves in the market, a wealthy woman approached her. She was elegant, draped in jewels, her perfume filling the air like authority itself. She picked up one of Preeta's scarves, turning it over with disdain. "How much?" she asked coldly. Preeta hesitated. 200 rupees, ma'am," the woman laughed, tossing the scarf back onto the table. "This is worth less than a rag. Do you really expect anyone respectable to wear this?" Her words stung, but before Preeta could reply, a young man at her side sneered. "No wonder she looked so tired. She married that mechanic, didn't she? Poor girl threw her life away." Preeta's face turned pale. She stood frozen, humiliated, while people around whispered and chuckled. I arrived just then, having left work early. When I saw those tears forming in her eyes, a storm erupted inside me. I stepped forward, placing myself between her and those vultures. My eyes locked with theirs, and I spoke with a calmness that barely contained my rage. "Be careful with your words. You don't know who you're speaking to." The woman raised an eyebrow, mocking. "And who exactly are we speaking to? A broke mechanic and his desperate wife?" The crowd laughed. Preeta pulled at my arm, whispering, "Watson, please. Let's just go." But I didn't move. I wanted to shout, to tell them everything, to wipe those smirks from their faces with the truth. But not yet. The time wasn't right. So I leaned close and whispered to her, "Hold on a little longer, Preeta. Very soon, they'll regret every word. That night, as she slept beside me, I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. I knew I couldn't let her bear another day of humiliation. The secret had to come out soon. The empire that was mine by birth, the wealth I had hidden away, the power I had protected. It was time to reclaim it all. Not for me, but for her. For the woman who had stood by me when the world spat on my name. The next morning, I made a call I hadn't made in years. A single call to an old friend, one of the few men I trusted. His voice came through the line, deep and steady. "Watson, I was wondering when you'd reach out. Are you ready?" I looked at Preeta, still asleep, her face innocent in the early light. My chest tightened with resolve. "Yes," I replied. "It's time." What came next would shake everything. The people who mocked us, the family that betrayed me, and even Preeta herself, who had no idea she had married not a poor mechanic, but a hidden billionaire. And I knew the revelation would change our lives forever. The call I made that morning set everything into motion. For years, I had hidden, watching from the shadows while my stepbrother paraded around with wealth that was never rightfully his. But now the game was shifting. My old friend Marcus was not just a trusted ally. He had been my father's most loyal advisor. When my family conspired to throw me out, Marcus had been the one to quietly protect my shares, my investments, the pieces of the empire that couldn't be stolen. When we met later that evening in a discreet cafe, Marcus's eyes widened as if he was seeing a ghost. "Watson," he breathed, gripping my hand firmly. "You've been silent for so long. I thought maybe you'd given up." I shook my head, my jaw tightening. I was waiting for the right moment. But now I can't let it go on. Not when Preeta is suffering because of my silence. He studied me carefully. "And does she know?" I shook my head. "Not yet. She believes I am just a poor man. She married me in that belief. I couldn't bear to tell her the truth until I was ready to act." Marcus leaned back, nodding slowly. "Then the time is ripe. The board has grown restless with your brother's reckless ways. He squanders money on lavish parties, bribes, and indulgences. The shareholders whisper about replacing him, but no one has dared challenge openly. If you walk back in with proof of your holdings, they'll stand behind you." I exhaled deeply, relief and tension mingling. "Then we begin." But as I prepared to reclaim what was mine, I knew Preeta couldn't be left in the dark forever. She deserved to know the truth even if she might struggle to believe it. Still, when I returned home that night, seeing her curled up with a piece of bread for dinner, her face tired but still radiant, I couldn't bring myself to shatter her world just yet. Instead, I sat beside her, gently brushing hair from her face. "Preeta," I whispered, "would you trust me if I said our lives are about to change?" She looked at me with soft confusion. "Watson, our lives already changed the day I married you. Nothing else matters." Her words cut me both ways, sweet with loyalty, painful with the knowledge of what I was hiding. Over the next weeks, I moved silently but decisively. Marcus connected me to lawyers, bankers, and accountants who had quietly kept my assets alive under coded names. Every meeting revealed more of what had been waiting for me: luxury properties, dormant accounts, controlling stakes in multiple businesses. All of it had been gathering dust while my stepbrother paraded as the sole heir. I remember one night vividly. Marcus handed me a thick folder filled with documents. "Watson, you're not just wealthy. You are the majority owner. The empire is still yours." My hands trembled slightly as I flipped through the papers. It felt surreal. For so long, I had lived like a beggar, yet here was proof that I had been a billionaire all along. My father's legacy had not been lost. It had only been hidden. But with the power came responsibility and danger. If my stepbrother discovered that I was preparing to reclaim everything, he would stop at nothing to silence me. Meanwhile, life with Preeta remained outwardly the same. She continued to sell scarves, unaware that her husband was quietly orchestrating a storm that would shake the city. But small things began to change. I brought home better food. I paid the rent in advance. I bought her a warm shawl that made her eyes glisten with joy. She asked no questions, only thanked me with that smile that could melt any storm. Yet whispers in the marketplace grew louder. Her friends noticed the change. One even mocked her openly. "So, Preeta, did your mechanic finally learn how to make money?" Or are you working extra jobs behind his back? Preeta flushed, humiliated, but before she could answer, I stepped forward, my voice calm but carrying steel. Careful with your tongue. You'll regret the day you ever doubted her. They laughed, but my eyes held a promise they couldn't understand. The real test came when I attended the first shareholders' meeting after years in exile. Dressed in the same worn jacket I always wore, I walked into the grand hall where my father's empire was run. The room fell silent. My stepbrother, seated at the head of the table, went pale when he saw me. "Watson," he spat, his voice trembling with forced authority. "What are you doing here?" "You don't belong." Before he could finish, Marcus placed a thick folder on the table. "He does belong, more than anyone here. Gentlemen, I present the legal documents proving Watson holds controlling shares in this company." Gasps filled the room. My stepbrother leapt to his feet. "Lies!" "He's a nobody, a pauper." I stood tall, my voice calm but thunderous in its truth. "You tried to erase me, but you cannot erase blood. I am my father's son, and I will not let his legacy be destroyed by greed." The board members exchanged glances. Some nodded, others whispered. One finally stood. "We've had enough of your reckless leadership," he told my stepbrother coldly. "If Watson is truly the rightful heir, then I will stand with him." One by one, others followed, until the room was divided, and then shifted entirely in my favor. My stepbrother's face twisted in rage, but he could do nothing. The documents were undeniable. The empire was mine again. When I left that building, my heart pounded with triumph. But my first thought wasn't of power or revenge. It was of Preeta. I could picture her sitting in that tiny room, mending scarves under the dim light. She had no idea that her life had just transformed forever. That night I returned home earlier than usual, carrying a bag of fresh groceries and a small velvet box in my pocket. Preeta looked up in surprise as I entered. "Watson, where did you get all this?" she asked softly. I smiled, kneeling in front of her. "Preeta, you married me when you thought I had nothing. You endured hunger, humiliation, and hardship by my side. But today, I want to tell you the truth." Her eyes widened, confused. "What truth?" I took a deep breath, pulling out the velvet box. Inside lay a necklace of diamonds that glittered like captured stars. "I am not the man you thought I was. I am not poor, Preeta. I am the heir to a vast empire, a billionaire, hidden in plain sight." The silence that followed was heavier than any storm. She stared at me, at the necklace, at my face, as if I had spoken a foreign language. "Watson, what are you saying? This isn't a joke, is it?" I shook my head, my hand tightening over hers. "Every word is true. I hid it to protect you, to protect us until the time was right. But now it's time you know who your husband truly is." Tears welled in her eyes, not from joy but from shock. She pulled her hand back, standing abruptly. "All this time, you let me believe we were struggling, that we had nothing. You watched me suffer, sell scarves, starve, while you were a billionaire?" Her voice cracked with betrayal. I reached for her, my heart breaking. "Preeta, please. I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to protect you, to see if your love was real, untainted by wealth. And you proved it. You loved me when the world called me nothing. That love means more to me than any empire." But she turned away, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You lied to me, Watson. You let me endure humiliation while you held a secret this big. How can I ever trust you again?" Her words cut deeper than any enemy's blade. I had reclaimed an empire, regained wealth beyond measure, but at that moment, I feared I had lost the only treasure that mattered, her trust. And as she locked herself in the other room, crying, I realized the hardest battle wasn't against my stepbrother or the world. It was here, in my home, with the woman I loved more than life itself. The silence in our home was heavier than any poverty we had ever endured. For days after my confession, Preeta barely spoke to me. She went about her routines, cooking, cleaning, sewing, without looking into my eyes. At night, she turned away from me in bed, her body curled tightly as if building a wall I couldn't cross. I had faced ruthless businessmen, hostile boardrooms, and the betrayal of family, but nothing frightened me like the quiet ache in her silence. I tried to explain, again and again. "Preeta, I swear I didn't mean to deceive you. I wanted to protect you, to test the purity of our love." But she would only whisper, "You should have trusted me with the truth." Her words rang in my chest like a tolling bell. She was right. Love built on half-truths can feel like betrayal, no matter the intention. Meanwhile, outside our small home, the storm of my return to the Empire had already begun. News of my reappearance spread across the city like wildfire. Newspapers called me the Hidden Heir. My stepbrother raged publicly, calling me a fraud. Socialites speculated, business rivals circled like vultures, and people who had once mocked us now pretended they had always respected me. The world changed overnight, but Preeta remained distant, as if wealth only widened the gulf between us. One evening, after another long day at the company, I returned home to find her staring out the window. Her scarf was loosely draped around her shoulders, and her eyes were clouded with tears. "Preeta," I said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. She didn't move. "Do you know what hurts most, Watson? It's not the lie itself. It's that you didn't think I could handle the truth. You let me believe we were poor, let me endure humiliation in the market, let me feel ashamed in front of my friends. While you knew all along, you could have trusted me, but you didn't." Her voice cracked, and she finally turned to face me. "How am I supposed to believe you now?" "What else haven't you told me?" I swallowed hard, fighting the knot in my throat. "Preeta, there are no more secrets. Everything I did for us. I watched you love me when the world saw nothing in me. That love is my proof that you're the one person who deserves to share this life with me. If I could go back, I would tell you sooner, please. Forgive me." But her silence stretched on, and I knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily. To make matters worse, my stepbrother wasn't done with me. He launched smear campaigns in the media, bribed insiders to sabotage projects, and even sent men to follow me late at night. One morning, Marcus rushed into my office with grim news. "Watson, your stepbrother isn't just spreading lies. He's digging. He's trying to find weaknesses, especially in your personal life. If he learns about Preeta, if he realizes how much she means to you, he'll use her against you." My blood ran cold. The very thought of Preeta being in danger sent fire through my veins. "He will not touch her," I said, my voice low and sharp. "I'll destroy him before that happens." But Marcus shook his head. "We must be careful. Right now you're walking a thin line. The shareholders support you. But if your personal life turns into a scandal, they might waver. Protect her, but also prepare her. She can't remain in the dark about the dangers." That night, I tried again to bridge the distance between us. As she sat sewing by the dim light, I gently took the fabric from her hands. "Preeta, there's something you need to know. My stepbrother. He won't stop, and I fear he might target you." Her eyes widened, alarm flashing across her face. "Target me? What do you mean?" I took her hands firmly. "He knows I love you. That makes you my greatest strength and my greatest vulnerability. I don't want you to be afraid, but I can't protect you if you don't let me in. I need you to trust me again." For the first time in days, her gaze softened. She squeezed my hand faintly, whispering, "I don't need diamonds, Watson. I don't need palaces or titles. I just need the man I married, the man who held my hand in the rain, who laughed with me even when we were hungry. Don't let him disappear under all this wealth." Her words pierced me deeper than any boardroom insult. In that moment, I understood. Reclaiming the empire meant nothing if I lost her heart. So I made a choice. The very next morning, I announced a press conference, not in a gilded hall or luxury hotel, but in the very market where she once sold scarves. Reporters gathered in confusion as I stood on the same wooden crate she used as a stool. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. "I stand before you not just as the heir to an empire," I began, my voice firm, "but as a man who owes everything to his wife. This market witnessed her struggles, her dignity, her courage. While the world mocked her for marrying a so-called poor man, she never wavered. Today, I tell you, she is the reason I am standing here. Without her, I would have remained lost in shadows. She is my partner, my equal, my queen." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Preeta, standing at the edge, stared at me in shock as cameras turned toward her. I continued, my heart thundering. "To those who doubted her, to those who mocked her, know this, she married me for love, not for wealth. And I will spend my life proving that her choice was not foolish, but the wisest of all." When I stepped down, the crowd erupted in questions, but I ignored them all and went straight to her. Preeta's eyes glistened with tears, but this time they weren't of pain. They were of something softer. "Watson," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to—" "Yes," I interrupted gently, cupping her face. "I had to, because the world needed to know the truth about us. And you needed to know that no empire, no fortune, no boardroom matters more than you." She broke then, collapsing into my arms, her tears wetting my shirt. "I was so afraid, Watson. Afraid you were changing, afraid I was losing the man I loved. But you proved me wrong." I held her tightly, relief washing through me like rain after drought. "You will never lose me, Preeta. Not to wealth, not to power, not to anyone." For the first time since the revelation, she smiled. A true smile, soft and radiant. And in that moment, I knew I hadn't just reclaimed my empire. I had begun to reclaim her trust. But as the cameras flashed and the world buzzed with our story, I couldn't shake the warning in Marcus's words. My stepbrother had been humiliated, but he wouldn't stop. And I had a gnawing feeling that the battle ahead would not be fought in boardrooms or newspapers, but somewhere far more dangerous. Because now he knew where to strike. And the target was the woman in my arms. I should have known the press conference would provoke him. My stepbrother was never the type to take humiliation quietly. Within hours of my words echoing across the city, his wrath was already moving in the shadows. It began with threats. Anonymous letters slipped under my office door, warning me to stay silent or lose everything. Then came the sabotage, supplies delayed, contracts mysteriously cancelled, trusted employees bribed to turn against me. But I had expected all of that. What I didn't expect was how far he would go to strike at the heart of what mattered most. It was a cold evening when it happened. Preeta had gone to the market alone to pick up vegetables, insisting she could manage by herself. I was in a meeting with Marcus when my phone rang. Her voice trembled on the line. "Watson, something's wrong. 2 men have been following me since I left the house. I'm scared." Every drop of blood in my body froze. "Stay where you are," I said, my voice sharp with panic. "Tell me exactly where." By the time I reached the market, she was gone. The stall owners told me 2 men had cornered her near the alley, forcing her into a black car before driving away. My heart thundered, rage consuming me. My stepbrother had crossed the one line he should never have touched. Marcus gripped my shoulder firmly. "Watson, listen to me." "We'll call the police." "No," I snapped, my voice cold. "This is my battle. He wants to break me through her. He wants to make me kneel. But I will not give him that satisfaction. I knew exactly where he would take her. There was an old estate, once part of my father's holdings, now claimed by him after he pushed me out. A place far from the city, hidden from prying eyes. That's where he'd hide her. When I arrived, the gates loomed tall and rusted, guards pacing with guns slung over their shoulders. But rage has a way of making a man fearless. With Marcus beside me and a few loyal men, we stormed the grounds, forcing our way past those who stood in our path. Inside, I found him. My stepbrother, smirking in a lavish chair, while Preeta sat bound to one across from him. Her eyes widened when she saw me, tears spilling freely. "Watson!" she cried. My stepbrother rose, clapping mockingly. "Ah, the prodigal heir returns. You think you can steal back everything so easily? You think love will save you?" He kicked over a glass, the sound shattering like his words. "She doesn't belong in your world. She never did. And now I'll prove it." I stepped forward, fury in my veins. "Let her go. This is between you and me," but he only laughed bitterly. "You always had the charm, Watson. Always had the father's love, the admiration, the strength. Do you know what it was like standing in your shadow? Watching everything slip into your hands while I was treated as less? I swore I'd take everything from you, and now I have." He gestured to Preeta cruelly. "Even her fear belongs to me now." I clenched my fists, but Preeta's voice cut through my rage. "Don't listen to him, Watson. Don't lose yourself for me." Her courage steadied me. I met my stepbrother's gaze and spoke with quiet certainty. "You've always believed wealth is power. But you're wrong. Love is power. Integrity is power. That's why no matter what you try, you will always lose." His smirk faltered, just slightly. And in that moment, my men surged forward, overpowering the guards. Chaos erupted in the room, but I moved straight to Preeta, untying her ropes, lifting her into my arms as if nothing else mattered. She clung to me tightly, whispering, "I knew you'd come." The battle around us ended quickly. Marcus and the others subdued my stepbrother, holding him as he raged and cursed. I stood before him, Preeta's hand in mine. "This ends today," I told him firmly. "No more games. No more cruelty. The law will take what's left of you, and I will never let you touch her again." For the first time I saw fear in his eyes, not of me, but of the truth. He had lost. Days later, the courts stripped him of power, exposing his corruption. The empire once again was firmly mine. But none of that mattered as much as the moment Preeta and I stood together on the balcony of our new home, a real home, built not just with wealth, but with the love we had proven through trials. She turned to me, her eyes shimmering in the glow of sunset. "Watson, I never cared about riches. I only ever wanted you, but now I see what you meant when you said you wanted to protect me. You carried such a heavy burden alone. I was angry because I thought you didn't trust me. But the truth is, you were carrying me even when I didn't know it." I cupped her face gently, my heart swelling. "Preeta, I made mistakes. I should have trusted you from the beginning. But if there's one thing I'll never stop doing, it's loving you, with or without fortune, in palaces or in shacks. You are my wealth. You are my empire." Tears slid down her cheeks, but her smile was radiant. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering against my chest. "Then promise me, Watson. Promise me we'll never let money come between us again. Promise me we'll stay the same as we were, two people against the world." I held her close, the city lights blooming beneath us, and vowed, "I promise, forever." And in that embrace, I knew the truth. The world had seen me as a billionaire reclaimed. But in reality, I was a man who had lost and found something far greater. Wealth can buy castles, power, and fame. But love, the kind that endures hunger, betrayal, and danger, love is the one treasure no fortune can match. Preeta was not just my wife. She was my miracle, my strength, my destiny. And as long as she stood by my side, I was the richest man alive.